Adoration has the idea of love, affection that's attached to that word. When you think about praise, there is an adoration. There's a love that's attached to that. Approval is something that goes along hand in hand with praiseworthy. If you can't approve of the thing, there's no way for you to praise the thing. No matter how much you may actually be able to tell that it should be praised by someone, if you don't approve of it, you're not going to be able to praise it as you should. And lastly, affirmation, that any praise that a person gets means nothing if there's not affirmation, either from the person giving it or on behalf of the person who's receiving it. In other words, if a person does not believe the words that you're saying about them, it's not actually going to be considered praise. It may be along the lines of flattery, also may be something that's trying to pull one over on someone. So there needs to be that affirmation as well. Okay, Philippians 4 and verse 8 is in the midst of a letter where Paul is talking about all the various reasons that this congregation has given him joy. And at the end of this letter, as he's concluding, and he says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, in other words, those things are in accord with reality, whatever things are noble, kingly, whatever things are just, in other words, fair balance, whatever things are pure, that means unblemished, whatever things are lovely, those things that people can appreciate the beauty of, whatever things are of good report, whatever they can speak highly of, if there's any virtue, moral courage, or excellence attached to it, if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on those things. What we're going to see next month is that when we apply all these different terms that Paul is talking about here, that's when the God of peace, we know that he is with us. And so Paul's point behind all these terms is not to individually be able to excel at one and the others mean nothing, but that we excel at all of these things so that we might have the true peace that God gives, and even the God of peace himself with us throughout our days. And so when we began looking at that word last week, praiseworthy, we noticed that it came from a Greek word that means proper or fitting praise. In other words, it's accurate or enthusiastic acknowledgement of what deserves to be praised. So it begins with the idea of acknowledging something, of recognizing that something is indeed worthy of praise. But then it has to be that if it is indeed deserving of praise, I have to examine myself and ask myself, do I approve of that thing? And it may be that a person is good at something, but it's not something that I'm going to praise because I don't approve of it. Kids, that's why your mother never praises you for how much time you spend on video games. You may be really, really good at that video game, but they do not approve of it. Therefore, they're not going to praise you for that thing. However, when you bring home good grades, they're going to praise you for that. When you make good choices, they're going to praise you for that because that's something that's deserving of it, and it's also something that they acknowledge and approve of. And that's when they are able to enthusiastically give praise for that thing. So both of those things have to be there in order for praise to be given, biblically speaking. And so Paul does conclude his list with these certain things to meditate upon as his last commendation of that list. So what I want to talk about tonight then is really this idea of praising others, but I really want to keep it within the idea mainly of within our homes and within those people, that circle of people that we are closest to. And I think this is something that's very much needed. If you know me at all, you know I'm a very humble person and get embarrassed by praise. Right. Praise is something that everyone appreciates. Praise is something that when someone gives that to you, you cannot help but feel a jolt in the arm. I believe it was Mark Twain that said that he could live for 2 days or 2 weeks or maybe even 2 months on a couple of good praises. And he was saying that to illustrate the idea of how much energy that it gives you. And there's a lot of things in life that God has given to us that really rejuvenates us and shoots a shot of adrenaline into us, if you will. In John 4, you remember that Jesus is there and his disciples, and they've been preaching and teaching and journeying, and they're in the area of Samaria, and they need some food. They want something to eat. And so Jesus stays behind while the rest of them go into the town. Jesus, it seems, is too weary to really want to go into the town. But while he is there, he has that conversation with the Samaritan woman at the well. And in the midst of that conversation, a lot of things about who Jesus is revealed to her. And she wants to go back and tell the people in the city what it is that she has learned about Jesus. So when the disciples come to Jesus in John 4 with the bread, Jesus says, I have bread to eat of that you don't even know about. And the disciples say, have somebody given him something to eat? Because he seems to be rejuvenated and energetic once again. And that was not from physical sustenance. That was just from an encouraging encounter with another person. When we are purposeful about being encouraging to others, praising others, saying good and beneficial things to others, recognizing things that people do and genuinely offering them praise for what it is that they have done, that reveals a lot, and it has a lot of power that's attached to it. The tongue, as you know, and this has probably been a point in hundreds of lessons before, the tongue is a very powerful thing. And in James 3, when we go there, typically we go to James 3 and we point out all the negatives of the tongue. And indeed, James himself does that as well. But notice the first few verses of James chapter 3. He says in James 3, verse 1, "My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that you shall receive stricter judgment." It sounds very, very negative, but think about the positive aspect of what he just says. The tongue is a powerful instrument, and with it, a person can teach. But you have to be careful with it. And many of you should not become teachers because you're going to fall under stricter judgment. But the tongue has the ability to teach others. In verse 2, he says this, "For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he's a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body." Another thing that the tongue is able to do is able to lead, just like that bit in that horse's mouth. It's able to turn a person's head in one direction or another. And so with our speech, we can teach, we can lead. Then he talks about the rudder of a ship. And even so the tongue, or verse 4, "Look also at ships. Although they are so large and driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot desires." So it's able to teach, it's able to lead, and it's also able to direct. We are able to do all of these things with the tongue. There's so many negative aspects that we talk about with the tongue, and rightfully so. It's a dangerous tool that we have. However, with it, we can also do great and wonderful things because it is so powerful. We need to take this lesson to heart whenever we ask ourselves this question: are you more prone to praise or to criticize? And that is one that I have struggled with a lot in my life. Are you more prone to praise or to criticize? What is easier, or what comes more natural to you? Praising or criticizing? Praise was not one of those things that we had a lot in our household. It was not something that we did. And even as I've raised my kids, praise is something that's hard to come by. There's always that little element that I want to throw in there that, yes, you did something well. However, here's something else you could have or should have or might have or need to think about more instead of just being able to praise. If you've taken those love language tests to see which one is yours, it may be that words of affirmation is your love language. That means for you being able to hear words that are not just good, pleasant words, but words that are meaningful, words that are thoughtful, words that actually apply to you, words that are actually believable about you, those have a tremendous effect. But if those words are given in a negative way or a negative tone even, they can have a devastating effect, especially upon those whose love language is that words of affirmation. That's why we need to be very, very careful with the use of our tongue. And that means that we need to choose between what's commonly called a basement person or a balcony people. This comes from a book written by Keith Miller that talks about passionate people. And in this book, he talks about basement people. These are the people in your life that may be from the past, or they could be somebody in your present, but many times it is someone in your past. That voice, though they may not even be there anymore, that voice is still there. And they're always dragging you down. They're always telling you, you can't do that. That was a stupid thing to do. When are you ever going to learn? Those types of things that bring you down and cause you to not try to excel. Because why should you? It's not going to be appreciated anyway. Or you can have people in your life who are these balcony people. And the idea is these who are watching you from above, and they're applauding you, and they're singing your praise, and they're congratulating you, and they're encouraging you, telling you, you can do this thing, you can push through, you are strong enough, you are smart enough, you're going to get this down. We are always making the choice on which one we're supposed to be. It's interesting that in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, it talks about, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run with endurance the race that's set before us. Looking to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Jesus, for the joy who was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of God. But in that verse 1, it says that we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. We always point back to chapter 11, and it says that this is that great cloud of witnesses. Those people who are encouraging us, those people who are saying that we can make it, are those people who are the faithful of old. And they are surrounding us like a balcony full of people as we run the race, telling us, you can make the goal as well. You don't have to give in. You don't give up. You keep moving forward. You stay faithful. It is all worth it. So if we want to be those balcony people among that great cloud of witnesses, we have to learn to be faithful people who ourselves are running that race and encouraging others to do the same. Jesus, I believe, was this type of person. There are several examples in the Scriptures. Here's just a few of where Jesus praised others. In John 1, in verse 47, is one example. John 1 and verse 47. This is where Nathanael is called. Jesus saw Nathanael coming in verse 47, coming toward him, and said of him, behold, an Israelite, indeed in whom is no deceit. And it's interesting that Jesus proclaims that about Nathanael as he's coming to him and meets him on this occasion. Behold, an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. As we talked about with praise, one thing about praise is that praise is something that is supposed to be verbalized. It's not something that you just acknowledge or just feel or just think about. Approval that is only thought about does no one any good whatsoever. Approval that is only thought about does no one any good. It only helps when it is spoken. It is only encouraging when it's verbalized. It is only edifying when it is said. Jesus knew this about Nathanael. Jesus didn't have to say this about Nathanael to get Nathanael to maybe try to verify it. Jesus said it that he might praise Nathanael and let others know this is a man in whom there is no deceit. You have other occasions as well in the life of Christ. Matthew 8 and verse 10 is another example where he meets with those who seem to make him marvel at the amount of faith that they have. This centurion with the servant who is sick, and we looked at this not too long ago. When Jesus heard it, well, this man said that you don't even need to come to my house, but just speak the words. Jesus marveled and said to those who followed, surely I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. When we seek to praise others, and this is the way that Jesus did it, it's not just directed toward the person, but notice that Jesus said this to the others that were around. When we praise someone, don't just say it to them, but say it to others about them as well. Jesus took the occasion to say to those around him, I have not seen faith like this man has, even in Israel. Now, how do you think others now looked at that man? How do you think that man now looked at himself? What kind of trust and confidence do you think it engendered within all of them on that occasion to hear that level of praise? In Luke 21, verses 1 through 4, this widow with her 2 mites. They were rich in verse 1 who were putting their gifts into the treasury. And Jesus saw a certain poor widow putting in 2 mites. So he said, truly I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all. For all these out of their abundance have put in offerings for God. But she out of her poverty put in all the livelihood that she had. Everything that she has, she's put into this thing. Many times we think that praise is only for those who have done these great, tremendous tasks, as it is put on a scale of monetary value, or on a scale of value when it comes to abilities or talents. It has to be outstanding in some other way other than just devotion or trust. Many times our children will not be praised for the little things they may do around the home because it's something they're supposed to be doing anyway. And really, we could do it faster and do it better than them if they would just move. So they don't get praised for it. Instead of recognizing what it is that they're doing, that because they're a part of that home, because they love their parents, because they want to help, they should be praised for that. It's appropriate. it should get our approval, and we should verbalize it, and they should hear it. It's a valuable tool. But Jesus is not the only one. You have others, like in Acts 4, verse 36, where the apostles praise this man that we don't even recognize him many times by the name that his parents gave him, Joseph. But we do know who son of encouragement is. We know that's Barnabas. We know that Barnabas means son of encouragement. And from that day forward, I don't know of anybody ever calling him Joseph again. It was always Barnabas. Because of all the things he did, he sold his land and gave it to others. He was the one who brought or went with Paul on these missionary journeys, who when John Mark was dismissed by Paul as being somebody not worthy to go on the journeys any further, Barnabas took John Mark and went on journeys with him. And later in life, John Mark was later going to be profitable to Paul once again in his work for the gospel. And maybe because of Barnabas and the encouragement that he gave. But we can become so identified with praise. We can become so identified with encouragement that that's what our name would be. So when people think about me, do they think about a person who's encouraging, or do they think about a person who's always tearing down, always finding the negative, always looking at what can't be done or what shouldn't be done, or when will we learn not to try? Or are we the kind of person who's always motivating and encouraging others to stay the course? Paul himself in Philippians 2, in this same letter where he talks about this word praiseworthy, the praise that he gives these two men, Epaphroditus and Timothy. Philippians 2 and verse 19, he says, I trust in the Lord to send Timothy to you shortly, that I also may be encouraged when I know your state. Paul says about this young man, I have no one like-minded who will sincerely care for your state. All others seek their own, but not the things which are Christ Jesus. But you know, it's not just Paul saying this about his own testimony, but you know his proven character, that as a son with his father, he served with me in the gospel. Therefore, I hope to send him at once, as soon as I see how it goes with me. Epaphroditus in verse 25, Paul said, I felt it necessary to write about him to you, my fellow brother, my fellow worker, my fellow soldier, but your messenger, and the one who ministered to my need, since he was longing for you all and was distressed because you heard that he was sick. For indeed he was sick almost to death. But God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. Therefore I sent him more eagerly, that when you see him again you may rejoice, and I may be less sorrowful. These types of words that are used about these biblical men and women that we can read about it in the Scriptures are to teach us a great lesson about the character that not only we should have like Timothy and Epaphroditus, but also the way in which Paul himself recognized these people and identified with these people and praised these people and how these people motivated others. And God saw fit to have their names recorded for us that we might forever learn from them. So what is the real power that praise gives? If you turn to the Proverbs 18 and verse 4, one of the things we learn about praise and how powerful it is something that's life-giving. Proverbs 18 verse 4 says, the words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The wellspring of wisdom is a flowing brook. Some of yours may say the life stream or the life-giving stream or the life-giving water. It has this idea that it's a fountain that is always there that you can always come and drink from. It's much like what Jesus tells the woman at the well. If you drink from this well, you'll never be thirsty again. When we are able to speak that way, that's the kind of refreshing that it gives to others. Whenever we're able to praise someone for something that they have done, that is like health to their bones, especially when that person is downtrodden, when that person is confused, when that person is lost, when that person doesn't know what direction they're supposed to turn to, and we're not only able to provide them sense of direction, but the encouragement that they can do it. That's what we're supposed to be about. That's health-giving, and that's life-saving. Proverbs 15 and verse 4 says this, a wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. A wholesome tongue, it is life-giving. Think of it this way if you struggle with this in your home. When I fail to praise my wife, my children, or as a child, praising your parents, when I fail to praise those that I worship with and speak well of them to others, that brings death. That will kill your home. That will kill a congregation. We have to be able to learn the art of being able to praise others the way that we should, because it does indeed give life. It's something that reveals our love for others as well. Ephesians 5:25, a verse you know so well, that Christ loved the church. And he loved the church so much that he gave his own life for her. He did this that he might sanctify her and cleanse her and wash her. But Jesus loved the church this much. Husbands are to love their wives that much. When I praise my wife, it reveals how much I truly love her. Affection and adoration mean nothing. Approval means nothing without some affirmation, without it being spoken. Me thinking good things about my wife, me thinking about her beauty, me thinking about her grace, me thinking about her wisdom, me thinking about her discretion, me thinking about those things does her no good whatsoever until I actually speak it. How is she to know that unless I speak it? It's wrong for me to say, well, she's going to have to do something great and tremendous before I'm going to give her that praise. She is deserving of that praise because she is your wife, just as the church is the bride of Christ. And you know that as the bride of Christ, we as the Lord's people mess up a lot. And yet the Lord still calls us a glorious church, a beautiful bride, adorned with the works of the saints. Over and over and over again, we are presented as being a glorious, victorious, lovely, faithful, pure, chaste bride for our Savior. That's how he views us, and he lets us know about it. That's what we're supposed to do for them as well. The Bible talks about with husbands and wives that we are glued together. So how much time do I spend glued to other things? My wife is supposed to be more important to me than my job and my hobbies. But do I praise my job, my coworkers, and things like that more? Am I so glued to my phone or my tablet that I don't spend time with my wife? The Bible says I'm glued to her, not glued to that. It's supposed to be that she is that center. She is that focus. She is the one that I'm devoted to in all of those things, not the devices. With children, with their parents, or Titus 2 verse 4 talks about women learning how to love their husbands and to love their children. That's a learned process. And part of that is also giving them that approval. Where did you learn to wash the dishes so well? Wow, you're so young and you're able to do that at your age? Wow, great job. You know what? Maybe they'll start doing it more. That wouldn't be a bad thing. Because they're recognizing that you see something they do of value. Instead of saying, would you move out of the way? Would you go occupy yourself with a television or a video game? Just get out from underfoot, get out of the way. When they're growing up and when they're real small, they want to help. And they'll do almost anything to help. Don't discourage that. Children are supposed to honor their father and their mother. Part of that honor, part of that love that you have for your parents is letting them know that you appreciate them for the sacrifices that they make and the job that they're doing in trying to raise you and to bring you up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. All of this is valuable, and it's all part of revealing how much we truly love others, because this is the harsh reality. If your wife receives more praise from others than she does you, if your children receive more praise from their friends at school, their teachers, than they do you, don't be surprised when they don't come home. That's the harsh reality. If your husband is receiving praise from others at work, but he doesn't receive praise from his wife when he's at home. Don't be surprised when he doesn't come home. The things that God gives to us and the things that God tells us that we're supposed to be meditating upon, one of them being praiseworthy, is no joke. It's like everything else that he gives to us. If some of this is missing, if there's part of the picture that's missing, there's going to be deficiencies. And there's going to be problems and trouble along the way. And unfortunately, something as simple as praise can be missing and cause these kinds of problems in a person's home. It shows respect as well. Well, before we move on from that, 1 John 4, 7 and 11. As we've been saying, that our love and our praise for others is something that's supposed to be confirmed as well. But in 1 John 4, verse 7, it says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God." Verse 11, "Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another." When it comes to our relationships with our brethren and others that we worship alongside and work alongside within the Lord's kingdom, it ought to be that we understand, look, there may be problems that we have with each other from time to time. That's going to happen, as in it is in any relationship. But this is one thing that I'm supposed to know with all surety. You love the Lord, and I love the Lord. And because of that, I need to understand that because of your love of God, there's going to be certain things that you're going to need. There's going to be certain things that you're going to stand behind. There's going to be certain things that you're going to go through in that relationship with God. I go through the same thing. So it helps me to be patient and understanding with you. That way I can love you the same way that God loved me. Because Jesus knew, God knows the struggles that I've gone through in order to be faithful to Him. But I do still love Him. He knows the times that I fall short and make mistakes along the way. But He knows I still love Him. And because of that, I am willing to change. And that helps in that relationship. So again, words of praise and identifying that with others is something that's very, very beneficial. It's also something that shows respect. Ephesians 5:33, in that same chapter we read a moment ago, where Paul is comparing the things of the church with marriage. He says, "Nevertheless, let each of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband." Praising the others shows that you respect them. For a husband, for a man, as Paul identifies here, this is something that's really, really big. One of the highest praises that a wife can often give to her husband is that she is listening to what he says, and she understands what it is that he is saying. That is something that is huge. That shows and proves respect for the other person. 1 Peter 3 and verse 7 says that you dwell with your wife with understanding. Yesterday, as I was thinking about this lesson and putting the final touches on it and things, I asked Angie, I said, "What is the highest praise I can give you?" And she says, kind of depends on the day and the mood I'm in. But that's true. You dwell with understanding. When she is aggravated by things at work and has a deadline that she has to meet, me coming up and saying, "You know what, you sure are a very pretty woman," that's not helpful at that moment. But there are other things that you can say that would be helpful at that moment. That's why dwelling with understanding shows not only that you love her, but that you also respect her. And you seek to dwell with her the way that God intended for you to. In Ephesians 6 and verse 2, as I said a moment ago, honor your father and your mother, because that's the first commandment with promise. God saw fit that this is the thing that would perpetuate blessings throughout a nation. Also, it encourages. 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 13 tells us very clearly that we are to be a people who are known and always to be about encouraging one another, building one another up. 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 11. "Therefore, comfort each other and edify one another, just as you are doing." That word comfort, some other versions use a different word than the word comfort. It uses the word encouragement. Both of the words are accurate to the translation, but they don't paint the whole picture by themselves. What it means is that you call someone alongside of you. And so you are comforting them, but you're also encouraging them. I'm calling you to my side. because you seem to be having some problems, some difficulty. So I'm going to bring you by my side that I might comfort you in that, but also encourage you, to let you know you are by my side and I am here to help you. We are going to get through this thing together. That's what encouragement in that verse means, to call to the side of. But it also says not only that you comfort one another or encourage one another, but you also edify one another. That is the building up. And that is really that idea of praising that other person and letting them know, look, you are strong enough to face this. Whatever the temptation is, this goes for everybody in this audience. Whatever temptation is that you're struggling with right now, this is how I want you to think about that for just a moment. Think about what that strong temptation is. Picture it very clearly in your mind and the struggles that you've went through. And then take what it is that God has said about temptations and struggles. It's common to all of mankind. And God will not allow you to be tempted beyond your ability to withstand it. That means that no matter what that is and how hard and difficult it may be, God knows that you are strong enough to conquer it. God believes in you. He trusts you. You can handle this. You've got others that are by your side. He's going to give you a way of escape. You can handle this. And if you get past this, there's going to be others that are going to come your way. But God knows this. You're strong enough to handle it. Because He's going to be by your side. We're going to be by your side. There's going to be an avenue of escape. You can do this. That's what it means to call to the side of. That's what it means to comfort. And that's what it means to edify and to build one another up in these things. Proverbs 15 and verse 13. Proverbs 15 and verse 13. A merry heart makes a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart the spirit is broken. Also in chapter 17 and verse 22 it says this, a merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. When your children do something, do they look forward to telling you about that? Because they know that you're going to be happy. Or do they know that you're going to be bothered by it, put off by it, distracted by it? You're not going to have the time for it, maybe later for it. A cheerful heart, a merry heart is what we're talking about. Enthusiastic praise of what it is that they have done. You've seen the pictures that are on people's refrigerators and the walls that the kids have made over the years. And you put them up there because it praises them and lets people know, look, this is what they did. People are in the hospital and they get these cards that little kids have made with crayons that it doesn't really make. I mean, I don't know, it's abstract. But those are the ones they remember. Those are the ones that they keep. Those are the ones that are most meaningful. You know, I know Charlie and I both appreciate the love that was shown toward us when our birthdays were a few weeks ago. And the cards that we received. And I gotta be honest with you, the first ones I read were the ones from the kids. And it was awesome to see the things that they wrote. It was also kind of weird to see the way that I looked through their eyes. However, this was them thinking for a moment about me. And that was awesome. That's the kind of edification and encouragement we can get. And those are the things that we're supposed to praise in our young ones as they grow up. And to be happy when we have such moments that we can do as that. So how do we go about doing this? This praising of others. Just a few thoughts. Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. Unfortunately, this passage has been limited only to the idea of not forsaking the assembling of the saints. And so it's been used only to talk about the idea of you need to always be at church, quote unquote. However, the verse is talking about the encouragement we're supposed to give to one another all the time in our coming together, whenever that occasion may be. Verse 24, let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. We're supposed to consider one another. That Greek word is a compound word that means basically you put under. So you put your mind under someone else. What it means is you take your mind, you take it off of whatever else that it's on, and you put it under that person. That I dedicate my thinking. I consider this other person. I consider you in order to stir up love and good works. And so the way in which praise is going to work for others is this way. We have to first be thinking about them. We have to first be noticing them. It has to be something that we think about ahead of time and not just as things happen. I need to find ways and look for ways, discover ways in which I can praise my wife and my children. Because unfortunately, sometimes our children think we're always trying to catch them doing the wrong thing. How about this? Catch them doing the right thing. If you have the mindset toward that, then I'm always looking for that, because that's what it means to be meditating upon things that are praiseworthy. Be always thinking about the thing that you can praise. Consider that when it comes to one another. This is a verse that I usually give for married couples whenever they have the Bible that they want people to write a verse or highlight a verse in. This is the verse I give for married couples, because if it's necessary when it comes to us as brethren for one another, how much more so when it comes to your home, between a husband and wife. Consider one another. Don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together, husband and wife. Always be coming together. Always be with each other. Always spend time with each other. Always consider how you can stir one another up to love and good works. That's the way that your home is going to be successful, as God has given us that very formula himself. Seek to encourage others, as we saw from 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 11, one another. Always be looking for those opportunities. Always be calling someone to your side. Who is the one right now that you are encouraging? Who is the one right now that you are edifying? Again, the question comes back, am I more prone to criticize or to praise? What's easier for me, to criticize or to praise? I need to have someone that I'm doing that with. Also, validate that praise. 1 John 3 and verse 18. It says here, my little children, do not or let us love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. He's not saying that there is no speaking about it, but don't let it be only about that. I'm not going to praise you for something, and then when you say, okay, I believe that, so now let me help you, say, well, no. It's not flattery. I validate it in word and in deed. Let me speak it, but also let's be about doing it, so that you understand how true that is. Saying to your wife how beautiful she is, but then criticizing everything about her. That's not validation. Speaking about how beautiful your wife is and how meaningful she is to you, but then you reach over and you hold her hand during prayer. That's validation, right? We see the difference. That's how we're supposed to be. And that's how we are in our relationships. Be timely with it. Proverbs 16, verse 24. Proverbs 16:24 says, pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul, and their health to the bones. And in Proverbs 25 and verse 11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. Be timely with it. Know when it's the right time, the right occasion, the right place. And always be about doing it. And so lastly, Hebrews 3 and verse 13, it needs to be something that you practice daily. Exhort one another daily while it is called today. That same phrase, while it is called today, is used in the scriptures to describe salvation. Now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the acceptable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. This is the time. Exhort one another daily while it is called today. Don't wait any longer, but seek to start praising others, especially those, as we've been talking about tonight, who are within our own home. And so the question I want to leave with you tonight is this, are you a balcony person? Are you a person who's cheering others on, encouraging them, letting them know that they're doing a good job and that they can do even greater things because you're behind them and support them? Or are you the basement kind of person who's asking the question, why are you even trying? And that'll never work or succeed. I know that most of you are this balcony type of people and are encouraging to others. But it is an area where we can grow in. So let's be about doing that with the Lord's help. If you're not a Christian tonight, you can be. God is calling you, letting you know that heaven is the place that you can dwell. And you can dwell there for all eternity with Him because His Son died for you. If you're not a Christian tonight and it's time for you to obey the gospel, to be immersed in the waters of baptism, to rise to walk in newness of life, we want to help you. Or if you need help in the areas that we've been talking about tonight or in some other area, won't you please let us know. As we stand and sing, won't you please come if we can help.